Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for another episode of Field Updates with the MIRA Coalition. My name is Cristina Dacchile Freeman, and I am one of MIRA's senior immigration attorneys. And I'm here today to talk to you about DACA and the fight to protect the dreamers who came to the U.S. as children, received protection from our government, and are now slowly being pushed out. So I'm really excited to dig in today. Next. So I want to start out by giving folks a little bit of context for what DACA is generally. So we're all starting from the same baseline of information. DACA stands for Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, and it was a program that was announced by the Obama administration on June 15, 2012. It's a program that many advocacy groups had worked for a very long time. It's a program that allowed eligible young adults who were brought to the United States as children to receive protection from deportation and to provide them with the work authorization they needed to be able to survive here in the United States. When DACA was first announced, it was clear that it would provide 2-year temporary status for individuals that would protect them from deportation actions and provide eligibility for a work permit. Those were really the only two things that DACA promised. We won't deport you, and we'll give you permission to work, assuming you meet our qualifications. Next slide, please. So who is eligible for DACA? The eligibility for DACA is actually fairly limited. First of all, due to ongoing litigation, both at the Supreme Court and federal court level, only at DACA renewals are being accepted at the moment. In other words, if you've never had DACA before, even if you qualify and meet these criteria on the screen, you aren't actually eligible to apply because no new applications are being considered. So really, when we're talking about DACA right now, we're talking about individuals who qualified for DACA quite some time ago and have probably been through at least 3 to 4 renewal cycles so far. So what makes someone eligible? You had to be in the United States before June 15, 2007. And at that time, you also had to be under 16 years old. You had to be under 31 as of the date that DACA was announced, June 15, 2012, be enrolled in school, have completed high school or a GED equivalent, or be a veteran. And you can't have legal status, right? So if you met all of these qualifications, you were allowed to apply for DACA. DACA enabled over 900,000 immigrants in the United States to stay here, to go to school, and contribute to our economy through their employment. And remember, the folks who are getting DACA are not individuals who came to the United States as adults and chose to enter unlawfully. These are individuals who were brought to the US as children, often by adults in their lives, and many of whom had no say whether or not they came to the US. Let's talk a little bit about the folks who have DACA. As of September 30th, 2024, there were roughly 538,000 active DACA recipients from close to 200 different countries of birth, residing all over the US. When you think about the sheer number of people supported by this program, it should give us pause before we start to take something like this away, especially given that the program requires an individual to have completed high school or to be in school and to be employed. These are individuals who have worked really hard to integrate themselves into our communities. Next slide. If you look at the ages of DACA recipients, you'll see that the vast majority are under 35 years old. The youngest DACA recipients at this point are around 18 or 19 years old, and the oldest, I think, are 43 or 44. I think that's the oldest you could possibly be right now and still have DACA. But when you look at this breakdown by age, one thing that you can see is that these are individuals who are established in our community. They're people who are your neighbors, your colleagues, your children's teachers, and your coaches, right? They have careers, they have mortgages, they have businesses, they have families. And many of them have children who themselves are American citizen. Many DACA recipients who came here at a young age haven't been back to their country of origin since entering the United States, and some don't even speak the language. Their only ties, their home is here in the United States. Next slide, please. So, why are we spending time today talking about DACA? Well, we want to make sure that you're aware of the challenges that DACA recipients are facing right now. The stability that DACA granted is under threat. The government is doing its best to end DACA in indirect ways. So the Supreme Court said that the Trump administration could not completely terminate DACA, right? They need to continue processing renewals while the litigation is ongoing. So instead, what the administration is doing is making very small shifts in policy and processing that make it nearly impossible for individuals with DACA to easily and efficiently navigate the process, right? So, for example, they are requiring more evidence than they used to, supporting evidence with your DACA renewal application. They're looking more closely at any negative factor in your history. And most of all, they're taking their time processing cases. In a few minutes, we'll talk about the recommended timeline for renewal of your DACA status. But it's really important to remember that right now, the administration is dragging its feet on processing these applications, which means that DACA recipients are facing the possibility of losing work authorization and being left without protection from deportation, not because of anything they've done or neglected to do, but because the government is deliberately refusing to adjudicate their cases in a timely manner, thereby allowing their paperwork to lapse. Next slide, please. So, what are the challenges that DACA recipients are facing right now? One thing is chronic uncertainty, right? If you don't know if your application is going to be processed on time, then you don't know whether or not you're going to be able to keep your job. If your work authorization status expires in 3 months and your DACA application has been pending for 9 months and you still don't have any answer, you're dealing with the possibility that in 3 months you may have to leave your job because you won't be authorized to work any longer. This is really stressful. It provides a huge financial barrier to individuals who have to maintain rent, pay utilities, take care of children. It also has an impact on physical and mental health. The constant stress of having to navigate procedures like this and the constant threat of family separation, loss of employment, barriers to healthcare, the potential for deportation, it's enough to make folks so anxious that it's hard to function. And yet our DACA recipients are having to push through those issues every day. DACA recipients also face legal limbo. As wonderful as the program was, and as much as it provided a new opportunity to individuals who would otherwise have no status in the United States, it didn't go far enough in offering protection because it doesn't actually offer any type of permanent legal status or any pathway to permanent legal status. So an individual who has had DACA ever since 2012 and has been renewing successfully for 14 years could still be sent home if at any point the DACA program is terminated. That's legal limbo, and that's not fair to individuals who have been building a life here for 14 years to not have any shot at becoming permanent residents or remaining in the US permanently. It doesn't seem right. There are also significant renewal delays, which we talked about before, and we'll talk about a little bit later as well. And then finally, educational barriers. DACA recipients aren't eligible for the same type of federal financial aid that many other students get. And because of that, their access to higher education is more limited. And those who do access higher education do so by working their way through school and finding other merit-based scholarships for which they qualify. Next slide, please. It is clear to me from what I see on the news, from what I learn about at meetings with other attorneys, that the Trump administration has significantly slowed the renewal of their DACA processing, and they are placing much greater scrutiny on DACA recipients who have arrests, prior deportation orders, or other immigration violations. Unfortunately, it has been confirmed that DHS has detained at least 270 DACA recipients and deported 86 others, leaving many DACA recipients feeling like even an approved DACA renewal application doesn't offer them the certainty and the stability they need to be able to build a life here in the United States. Next slide, please. So, what can we do to protect DACA? And I'm thinking about this we from two perspectives, right? If you're listening and you have DACA, I want to make sure that you understand some of our advice for individuals who are planning to renew their DACA. And if you don't have DACA but do have other types of status in the United States, we want to make sure that your legislators hear your voices. Okay, because it's really important. Individuals with DACA are not eligible to vote. So it's up to the rest of us who have that privilege to make sure that we are advocating for a permanent pathway to citizenship for these dreamers. Next slide, please. Okay, so we talked a lot about the processing delays, but for those of you out there who have DACA now, what exactly is our timeline recommendation in terms of when you should renew? Well, first of all, if your DACA expires in less than 6 months, you should be applying immediately, okay? Because we have heard about significant processing delays, and the chances of your application being completed in 3 months or 6 months is much less than it used to be. If your DACA expires in 6 to 12 months, you might want to consider filing your renewal early to help account for the delays later. The benefit of this is it means that probably you won't experience as much of a gap in employment authorization, right? Because your DACA will be approved, your DACA renewal will be approved before your current EAD, your work permit, expires. There is one downside to this that is worth noting, and if you have any questions about it, you should definitely consult an attorney. But it's worth noting that DACA renewals start on the day that the application was approved and then go for 18 to 24 months, depending on the grant. Now, that means if you apply to renew early and your renewal application is approved early, you might be costing yourself some months on the other end, right? Like if your DACA isn't set to expire until September 2026, but you applied last December, then your next DACA is going to expire before it would have if you had waited to apply to renew. I know that can be a little bit confusing. So again, if you have any questions on this or how it works, consider consulting with an attorney. Also, we'll be giving you a resource later on, an information helpline that you can call if you have questions about this filing process. And then finally, if your DACA expires in more than 12 months, it's worth talking to a lawyer before you file a DACA renewal, because renewing more than a year before your current DACA expiration date could lead to a significantly shorter period of DACA for you, and it's unclear that it would necessarily buy you any advantage with immigration. Next slide, please. So if you've already applied for DACA, one thing we want to make sure you're doing is monitoring processing times. Some people don't know this, but U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, USCIS, is required to publicly post the average processing times for each application. If you go to this link on the screen, egov.uscis.gov/processing times, and you put in Form I-821D, which is the consideration of deferred action for childhood arrivals, the form category, renewal, and the field officer service center, which is easy here because all of the DACA applications go through the service center operations, SCOPS. And then you click Get Processing Times. What'll show up is the current average processing times that it takes USCIS to adjudicate a DACA renewal. You can see here that the average time is 3.5 months, and yet we know that there are lots of folks who have been waiting more than 6 months. So what can you do if your application has been pending longer than the average processing times? Well, first of all, you can file a service request with USCIS online by going to this link on the screen, egov.uscis.gov/erequest. This allows you to put in your case information, your personal information, and to ask USCIS what is taking so long to adjudicate your case. Sometimes that can prompt movement on your case. It's also worth reaching out to your congressional representatives. Each congressional representative has in their office an individual who is tasked with maintaining relationships and liaising with other government agencies like USCIS. So your congressional representative has a staff member who is in regular communication with USCIS, and that person can advocate for your case. All you need to do is use this link to figure out who your congressional representatives are, and then call their office, explain the situation, and ask them to help you advocate with USCIS to approve your DACA renewal before your work permit expires. Next slide, please. Okay, last bit for current DACA recipients. I want to make sure that you understand that there are more potential case complications now than there used to be. And that is because at heart, DACA is discretionary. That means that USCIS can deny your application even if you meet every single eligibility requirement, right? They still, at the end of the day, get to decide whether or not they want to give you DACA. And so, as you can imagine, in an administration like this that is not friendly towards immigrants, they are looking for any reason on which to base a DACA denial. For that reason, things in your past that might never have come up in your DACA application cycle before might come up this time. So it's definitely worth consulting with an attorney helping you on your DACA case if any of the following are true for you. If you have ever been arrested or charged with any crime, doesn't matter how small it was, it doesn't matter if it was dismissed, it doesn't matter if the records were sealed, USCIS will still be able to see all of it. And so you're going to have to disclose it on your application, and that can lead to requests for evidence or potential discretionary denials. So it's really important that you work with an attorney to help explain what happened and to show USCIS that you continue to be a productive member of our community who needs and deserves the government protection they've received. You should also consult with an attorney if you've received multiple parking tickets, speeding tickets, or other traffic violations. USCIS sometimes argues that that shows a disregard for community norms and community rules, and so it can be the basis for a discretionary denial, as small as those things seem. You may also want to consult an attorney if you have visible tattoos, particularly face tattoos. Many times USCIS associates these tattoos with gang involvement. And so we want to make sure that there's no reason for USCIS to question whether your tattoo is something personal for you or whether it's some kind of mark of a gang affiliation, right? As ridiculous as that might seem, that is still the attitude with which USCIS approaches tattoos. And so it is worth consulting with an attorney if you have any very visible tattoos. Also, if you have public social media posts that are political in nature, we do know that the administration has been looking at people's social media profiles and using that to factor into discretionary decisions. And finally, if you were ever in immigration court before and you were either ordered removed or the judge administratively closed your case, which is a term of art that's a little hard to explain here, but just worth knowing that if you've ever been in immigration court before, you may want to consult with an attorney about what happened back then so that you can understand how it could potentially affect your DACA renewal this time around. And those are the highlights for individuals who have DACA already and are applying to renew. These are the things that we think you most need to know to be able to move forward. Next slide. Okay, so for the rest of us, particularly those of us who are eligible to vote in the United States, we need to be making some noise. There's a lot that you can do right from the comfort of your own home. So please, if you're seeing this, use the QR code on the screen or go to the website you see posted, www.homeishere.us, and demand that Congress end the detention of DACA recipients and all immigrants. Next slide. You can also participate in urging Congress to pass a pathway to citizenship, to permanent legal status for DACA recipients who have followed all of the rules, done everything they can, and desperately need a stable pathway to a future in the United States. So if that's something that you're passionate about and that you want to see happen, please use the QR code on the screen or go to www.nilc.org and figure out how you can take action to support the DREAM Act. Next slide, please. And finally, we want to remind you that the MIRA Coalition has a website. You can donate to support. You'll also find incredible resources, updates to recent policy changes, and information about the programs and services that we provide. And as always, if you have any questions, please, please, please reach out to us at MIRA's Immigration Helpline. You can see down at the bottom of the screen, there is an address there, bit.ly/MIRA Legal Helpline. We are able to answer whatever immigration questions you might have. We won't be providing legal advice, but we can talk you through and help you understand how what you're hearing and seeing in the media will have an impact on your case. And we want to hear from you because we know that this is a really tough time. And we know that for individuals with DACA, this is a time when they need the support of their community more than ever. So our staff is here for you. Our community is here for you. Please, please reach out with any questions you have. And as always, thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Field Updates. I hope to see you all again soon.